The text that could change my whole life came in while my truck was skidding across wet asphalt. My phone buzzed hard against the plastic of the dashboard. The screen lit up for just a second, long enough for me to see the preview before my eyes snapped back to the road. Come pick me up. I wore the dress. Rain hammered the windshield in thick sheets. The wipers fought it and lost. I was doing 70 on a road marked 45. For a second, the tires slid on a layer of water, and the steering wheel went light in my hands. I eased it back under control without thinking. I knew who sent the text. Genevieve. The cab of the truck smelled like wet wool, cold air, and sawdust. My work jacket was still on. My heart was beating too fast for the way my hands stayed steady on the wheel. 3 weeks earlier, I had been in the damp stone basement of her inn, talking about rotten beams and loan numbers, when I made the worst joke of my life. "I have an 800 credit score and a clean record, Jen," I had said, trying to cut the tension. "I'll marry you. Problem solved." Quote. She had laughed then, a short, polite sound, the kind of laugh people give to a joke they are too stressed to enjoy. She was not laughing now. The iron gates of Holloway Estate appeared in my headlights, black against the gray sky. The for sale sign her stepbrother's realty company had planted at the drive was leaning crooked in the mud, like it already knew it was unwelcome. I punched in the gate code without slowing down. The heavy gates swung open just enough for my truck to slide through. I did not go to the front entrance. I drove around to the side, near the service porch, where the shadows hid everything from the road. She was there. Genevieve stood in the rain wearing a white wedding dress, silk and lace clinging to her body. The hem was soaked in mud. She did not have flowers in her hands. She held a bottle of champagne by the neck like a weapon. Her dark hair, usually pinned into a strict twist for meetings with bankers and inspectors, had fallen loose in wet curls around her face. Mascara streaked under her eyes, but her jaw was hard. I threw the truck into park and killed the engine. The sudden quiet made the rain seem even louder. I stepped out. Cold water hit my face and soaked my t-shirt in an instant. I walked toward her. "You came," she said. Her voice sounded steady, but her hands were shaking. "Get in the truck, Genevieve," I said. "I did it," she whispered, looking down at the dress. "I almost walked down that aisle with a banker I do not love." I was 5 minutes away from selling my soul for his signature on a refinance loan. "Get in the truck," I repeated. I did not wait for her to move. I stepped in, took her elbow, firm but gentle, and guided her toward the passenger side. She was cold under my hand, trembling so hard her teeth clicked. I opened the door and lifted her up into the seat. White fabric filled the cab like a broken cloud. I shut her door, ran back around, and climbed in. I cranked the heat to full. She stared through the wet windshield, breathing in short, thin pulls. "The offer still stands, Gabriel," she said. My hands tightened on the wheel. "Which offer?" Quote. "The joke," she said, turning her head. Her eyes were dark and hollow. "You said you would marry me to save the inn." "I am calling your bluff." I looked at her, really looked, at the wet lashes, at the strong line of her chin, at the way she was trying to hold herself together with nothing but willpower. "This is not a bluff," I said. It was not a joke. I pulled away from the estate and drove toward the city. My apartment was 40 minutes away. A simple loft over a warehouse, full of drafting tables, rolled plans, and quiet. I took her there because she refused a hotel. "Julian will check hotels," she said from under my gray duvet, sitting on my couch in borrowed flannel. "He has alerts on my cards." Julian, her stepbrother. He had inherited most of the cash. She had inherited a broken inn and its debt. He wanted the land, not the history. Leaving town would not fix it. Julian already had the note information. He had a petition ready. If she disappeared, he could still push foreclosure, then tell the bank she was unstable and careless. It would give them cover to say no. The police could not help. Julian had not hit her. He had not forged her name. He used contracts, fine print, and charm, crimes that look clean on paper. I handed Genevieve a mug of hot tea. "Drink," I said. Her fingers brushed mine when she took it. Her skin felt like ice. I need a husband, Gabriel, she said. The bank will not refinance without a second person on the loan. They want a guarantor with money and stable income. The man I was going to marry today, the banker, he was going to sign, but he wanted me to sell the South acreage to Julian as a wedding gift. The vulture, I muttered, leaning against the counter. I could not do it, she said. I put on the dress. I heard the music start. I walked to the door, and then I ran. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Julian flashed on the screen. I saw you leave, Jen. The bank is pulling the extension. You have 48 hours to pay what you owe, or I buy your note. Don't make this hard. Genevieve read it and went quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a punch. He is going to win, she whispered. No, I said. He is not. I walked to the calendar on my wall, grabbed a marker, and drew a square around the very next day. We go to the courthouse tomorrow at 8, I said. We sign the papers. I put my name on the loan. We show the marriage license to the bank before noon. Gabrielle, she said, her voice shaking, why would you do this? Really? I looked at her, then at my hands. Because I hate seeing good buildings destroyed by bad people, I said at first. It was true, but it was not the whole truth. I let the silence carry what I could not say out loud yet. Her fingers dug into the folder in her lap, the edges bent under the pressure. Her shoulders were still shaking. Because Julian does not get to break you and call it business, I added. The courthouse the next morning smelled like floor wax and stale air. The clerk behind the glass barely looked at us. Names, she said. Gabriel Thorne, I answered. Genevieve Holloway, she said beside me. Her voice did not shake. The clerk typed, then asked, Witness? We froze. I can do it, a deep voice said from behind us. Marcus, my foreman, stood there in his work boots and jacket, holding his hard hat under his arm. I had texted him at 6 a.m. and said only, I need you. You called your employee? Genevieve hissed. I called my best friend, I whispered back. The ceremony was not romantic. No music, no flowers, no white aisle. Just a paper, a bored clerk, and a pen. Sign here, she said. I signed first, without hesitation. My name in black ink tied to her debt, her land, her fight. Genevieve's hand hovered over the line. She looked up at me, eyes wide. You can still walk away, she said. You do not have to ruin your credit for me. Sign the paper, Jen, I said. She took a breath and signed. When we walked out into the cold morning, the rain had stopped. The street was wet and shiny. People passed us without knowing anything had changed, but my whole life had just shifted 2 inches to the left. We were married. Okay, she said, already back in motion, checking her watch. I have to get this to the bank. Then I have to go cancel the reception food and call the florist and the musicians and... I will handle the bank, I said, taking the folder from her hands. She frowned. Then what am I supposed to do? Go to the inn, I said. Pack a bag. Her eyebrows pulled together. Pack a bag? Why? Because for this to work, I said, the bank has to believe it, and Julian has to believe it, which means I am moving in. Moving into Holloway, inn felt less like stepping into a home and more like walking onto a sinking ship. I drove up with 2 duffel bags and a toolbox. That was my life. Clothes, tools, and a brain that would not stop scanning load paths in every room. Genevieve met me at the front door. She was back in work mode already, holding a clipboard against her chest like armor. I put you in the blue room, she said. End of the hall. 3rd floor. Guest suite. This is temporary. Once the refinance clears and the winter season is over, we can end this. Legally. Sure, I said. Temporary. The blue room had a big bed, old wallpaper, and a window that rattled in the frame. I set my bags down and rubbed my hands together. It was freezing. Why is it this cold in here? I asked. The boiler runs on oil, she said, defensive. Oil is expensive. I am conserving until the loan closes. I have blankets. Your house is an icebox, I said. It is my house, she snapped, and I pay my own way. You are already guaranteeing the loan. You are not paying my bills. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a wad of folded cash. Here, she said, holding it out. "This covers the license fee and your gas. I will reimburse you for anything else." I looked at the money. My hands went into my pockets so I would not push it back in her face. "I do not want your money, Jen," I said. "This is a business arrangement," she said, voice rising. "Partners split costs." "Husbands keep their wives warm," I said. The words were out before I could pull them back. They hung in the air between us, heavy and hot. She flushed, the color rising along her neck. "We are not that," she said quietly. "On paper we are," I said, "and I am not freezing in my own house." Quote. I walked past her, found the thermostat in the hall and turned the heat up. Then I went back down to my truck, drove 20 miles in the rain to the hardware store, and bought what I really needed. Not flowers, foam sealant, plastic film for the windows, weather stripping. That night, while she worked in the library at her laptop, I moved from window to window with a caulk gun and a heat gun, sealing drafts, patching gaps, stopping the wind from climbing inside her walls. She did not tell me to stop. She just kept typing while I worked around her. 2 weeks in, we had a rhythm. I left at 6 in the morning for city job sites, checking steel and concrete, signing off on retrofits. I came back around 5 to a war zone full of caterers, decorators, and staff. The Christmas gala was 3 weeks away. If it went well, her numbers might save the year. If it failed, the bank would be done with her. One night I came home to find her pacing the kitchen with a pot of cheap pasta boiling over on the stove. "The inspector is coming Friday," she said. "If he sees the bounce on the east side of the ballroom floor, he pulls the permit for the gala. If he pulls the permit, I have to cancel. If I cancel, the donors walk." "The east joists are not rotten," I said. She stopped pacing. "What?" "I looked at them yesterday," I said. I had crawled under the ballroom during a quiet hour because I could not stop myself from checking. "Everyone keeps saying rot. It is not rot. The original builder cut the beams too deep to fit gas lines. They removed too much wood. The fibers are in tension and failing." Her eyes narrowed. "Is that good or bad?" Quote, "It is fixable," I said. "We do not have to replace the beams. We bolt steel plates to the sides, flitch plates. Steel takes the tension load. Wood handles the rest." She blinked. "Bolt steel to 100-year-old wood." "Yes," I said. "I can do it in 2 nights." "That sounds expensive," she said. "I have steel," I lied, "at the shop. Scrap pieces." The next morning I ordered custom-cut A36 plates and paid for them with my personal savings. It hurt. I did it anyway. Those nights, I spent hours in the crawl space under the ballroom, covered in dust, drilling through old fir beams. The air down there was close and thick. I could only move a few feet at a time. Genevieve stayed above me, on hands and knees, holding a work light and passing bolts down through the gaps in the floor. "You are good at this," she called. "It is my job," I grunted, bracing a 100-pound steel plate and lining up the holes. "No," she said softly. "I mean, you are good at taking care of things." I paused with the drill in my hand. The words hit harder than any praise I had ever gotten from a client. "Some things are worth taking care of," I said. We tightened the last nut around midnight. When I climbed out of the crawl space and jumped on the floor, it did not move. Rock solid. The next evening, the inn's event planner came in with a clipboard and a nervous smile. "The trust wants a picture," she said. "For the file. Not romantic. Just proof. Married owners. Dated. In the ballroom." "Of course they do," Genevieve muttered. They hung warm string lights across the rafters for a test. Staff moved tables in the background, pretending not to stare. I was in my gray t-shirt and work jeans, hands still a little greasy from installing the last plate. Genevieve disappeared upstairs and came back down in the dress. The dress she had run away in. White lace, fitted at the waist. Elegant in a way that did not match the crying woman in my truck 2 weeks earlier, but fit the steel in her spine. She walked down the staircase with her chin high, holding a champagne flute instead of swinging the bottle like a club. When she reached me, she did not hover at my side. She stepped in close and slid her hand into mine. fingers lacing with mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. "If we are doing this," she murmured without looking away from my face, "we do it my way." "Your way works," I said. I shifted my body just enough to stand between her and the rest of the room. It was subtle, but I saw the planner's eyes soften. Wives with real husbands get this kind of quiet protection. Paper marriages do not. The photographer snapped one frame. That was it. In the blurry background, staff moved chairs. In the foreground, Genevieve's hand stayed wrapped around mine, her eyes on me, a small, real smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Thank you, Gabriel," she said. "Do not thank me," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "Dance with me." "There is no music," she said. "I do not need music," I answered. I stood and offered her my hand. She took it. I pulled her in, just enough to feel the warmth of her body, then kept the space at a safe distance, my palm resting on her back through the lace. We swayed on the solid floor in silence. No band, no crowd, just the two of us and the creak of the old building settling around our weight. I kept my eyes off her mouth, because if I looked there, I would do something we could not take back. The next day, everything came crashing in. I found her in the library at the big oak desk, holding a certified envelope. The seal was torn, but she had not pulled the paper out yet. Her face was gray. "What is it?" I asked. "Julian," she said. She handed me the letter with stiff fingers. I read it once and felt my stomach go cold. It was from the trust overseer. Julian had filed a petition under a clause in the original deed. A moral turpitude clause. Some old Puritan language her great-grandfather had thought was a good idea. If the heir brought scandal or shame to the family name, the trust could force a sale of the property. Julian's claim was simple and poisonous. The quick, quiet marriage to a younger man with no public relationship history was suspicious. It looked like a fraud to trick the bank. It might damage the family reputation. He was asking for a hearing. Tomorrow. "If we cannot prove this is a real marriage," Genevieve said, her voice flat, "they let him force the sale before the gala. Before the refinance. It is over." I put the letter down slowly and looked at her. "So we prove it," I said. "How?" she demanded. "We have no history, no photos, no story. We met 6 months ago. You fixed my porch steps, then my beams. We signed a paper. That is it." Quote. I leaned over the desk, planting my hands on the wood so she could not look away. "Then we make a history tonight," I said. "We go where everyone can see us. We let them see us. We give them something real to talk about." She shook her head. "I cannot act that well, Gabriel." "You do not have to act," I said. "Just come with me." We went where the town watched everything. Mario's was the busiest restaurant on Main Street. Red booths, fogged windows, the smell of garlic and tomato in the air. The kind of place where everybody notices who you sit with and how close you sit. We got a small table by the window. People could see us from the street. I put my phone face down and pushed it aside. Genevieve folded her hands around the water glass, like she was holding onto something solid. "This feels fake," she whispered. "Then talk about something real," I said. So she did. She told me about growing up in the inn, how she used to slide down the polished banister in socks when her parents were busy with guests, how her mother taught her to fold napkins into swans, how her father used to tap every beam after a storm, listening for the one that sounded wrong. I told her about my first job on a crew, hauling lumber for men who thought college boy was an insult, until I started catching their mistakes before the inspector did. We ate slowly. We laughed once or twice, real laughs. I could feel eyes on us from other tables, from the bar, from the window. That was the point. When we stepped outside, it had started to rain again. The sidewalk was crowded with people leaving the theater next door. Talk and laughter floated around us. "Is this enough?" she asked quietly, glancing at the crowd. "For Henderson? For the trust?" "Not yet," I said. I turned to her. Her hair was curling at the ends from the damp. A strand stuck to her cheek. I reached up and tucked it behind her ear. Her breath caught. "Gabriel," she said, my name soft in her mouth. "Trust me," I whispered. I leaned in and kissed her. It was supposed to be for them. For the trust. For Henderson. For Julian. For anyone who thought this was fake. The second my lips touched hers, the world narrowed down to the warmth of her mouth and the way her fingers jumped up to grab my coat. She stiffened, just for a heartbeat, then melted against me. I kissed her with everything I had not said in 6 months. All the restraint and long days and late nights and half-finished sentences. I kissed her until I felt her knees go soft and had to pull her closer to keep her upright. When I finally pulled back, her eyes were wide and unfocused. Her cheeks were flushed. There were people all around us, and I did not care. That, I said, my voice rough, should convince them. She did not answer. She just stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as a contractor, not as a last-minute husband, but as a man. The hearing the next morning should have been the hard part. It was held in a small wood-paneled room at the municipal building. The trust overseer, Mr. Henderson, sat at the center of the table. He was an older man in a dark suit with a serious face and eyes that missed nothing. Julian sat on one side, smooth and confident in a fancy gray suit. Genevieve and I sat on the other. I could feel the tension in her shoulders through the sleeve of her blazer. Henderson asked questions. How long had we known each other? How had we met? When had our relationship changed from business to personal? We answered simply. I did not embellish. I did not try to sell it like a story. I just told the truth with the romantic edges stripped away. I met her when she called my firm to look at a sagging porch. I came back when she had problems with the ballroom. Somewhere between late nights in the basement and reading bank letters at her kitchen table, something shifted. Henderson watched us while we spoke, his gaze moving from her face to mine, to our hands, to our feet under the table. At one point he asked, Genevieve, why him? You had other options. She looked at me, then at Henderson. Because he never once told me to give up, she said. Everyone else told me to sell. He is the only one who asked me what I wanted to build. Quote. Henderson studied her for a long beat, then nodded. The trust recognizes the marriage, he said finally. The moral turpitude petition is denied. A weight lifted off my chest I had not realized I was holding. But Julian was not finished. We ran into him in the hallway outside the hearing room. He was leaning against the wall like he had been waiting. Cute performance in there, he said, eyes cold. Shame it will not matter. Genevieve stiffened beside me. What now, Julian? She asked. He smiled, slow and cruel. I know about the structural issues, Jen. I know your insurance company is nervous. I called them this morning, told them about the bounce in the ballroom floor. They are dropping you. No insurance, no gala, no revenue, no payments. Husband or no husband, you are done. Her face went pale. You can't do that, she said. I just did, he replied. He turned his attention to me, looking me up and down. And you, he said, do you know that everyone in town is laughing at you? They know she is using you for your credit score. Once she loses this place, she drops you and moves on. You are just a tool, kid. He stepped closer as he said it, angling his body toward Genevieve. His hand lifted, fingers reaching for her arm like he had done it 1,000 times. She flinched back, not with fear, with disgust. I caught his wrist before he could touch her. I did not yank. I did not twist. I just stopped him. Do not touch her, I said. My voice was calm. That made it land harder. Julian's eyes dropped to my hand on his wrist. You gonna hit me, Thorne? He sneered. No, I said. I released him and wiped my hand on my jeans like he was something dirty. I am going to outwork you. Genevieve's fingers slid to my forearm, a small, deliberate touch. Claim and consent in one move. You are right about one thing, I said to Julian. The insurance would drop her for structural risk. But they will not drop her if the risk is fixed. I filed the engineering certificate this morning. The floor is rated for 3 times the occupancy. I put my own stamp on it. His smile faltered for the first time. You stamped it, he repeated. Yes, I said, which means if anything happens to that building, I am the one who goes down. That is how sure I am. Julian scoffed. You are risking your license for a sinking ship. It is not sinking, I said, and you do not get to talk to my wife like that. I turned to Genevieve. "Let's go," I said. We walked away, leaving Julian standing in the hallway. "Back in the truck," she snapped. "You stamped it?" She exploded the second her seatbelt clicked. "Gabriel, do you know what that means? If there is a fire, if someone trips, if anything happens, you are personally liable. You could lose your career." "I trust my work," I said, watching the road. "That is not the point," she said. "I did not ask you to be a martyr. I asked you to be a partner." "I am being a partner," I said. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "You are being a savior." "I do not want saving if it costs you everything. I will cancel the gala." "You cannot cancel," I said. "I can," she said. "I will." "I am not dragging you down with me." She turned toward the window. The silence in the cab was heavy and tight. At the next red light, I reached for the center console and grabbed the small notebook I kept there. I tossed it into her lap. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it," I said. She flipped it open. Inside were neat lines of dates and notes. Every loan payment, every vendor deadline, every inspection date. Every time she had said, "This will crush me," and I had quietly found a way around it. "I am not letting you drag me down, Jen," I said softly. "I am holding you up. There is a difference." She ran her finger down the page, tracing the record of every time I had shown up without her having to ask. She closed the notebook with shaking hands. "Then tell me how to stand with you," she whispered. "The night of the gala," I said. "Do not hide in the office. Stand beside me. If Julian shows up, you look at me. If I say walk away, you walk away. That is how we do this as partners." She nodded once, jaw tight. "Okay," she said. Partners. The night of the gala came faster than it had any right to. The inn glowed. The ballroom was lit with warm lights. The floor I had reinforced held 200 people without a single creak. The band tuned up. Staff moved like a well-trained crew. For the first time, the place did not feel like it was dying. It felt like it wanted to live. Then Genevieve's phone rang. She took the call in her office. When she came back out, she looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under her. "What now?" I asked. "The insurance," she said, holding up her phone. "They reinstated the policy, but the underwriter added a condition an hour ago. $10,000 is a risk deposit by midnight or coverage lapses, and the fire marshal closes us down." "Julian," Marcus said from the doorway. He had come to help with security, wearing a suit for the first time in years. He called them again. I heard the message he left on the inn's voicemail. He used his name. Genevieve's eyes filled with panic. "I do not have $10,000, she said. "Not liquid. If I cancel, I lose the donors. If I do not cancel and something happens, I lose everything." Quote, "You are not canceling," I said. "You cannot fix this with a wrench," she said. "No," I said, pulling out my laptop. "I can fix it with paper." I opened my laptop on the front desk and pulled up everything I had, my stamped drawings, the photos of the steel plates, load test notes. The third-party inspection I had begged a friend to do as a favor. "Forward me the email," I told Genevieve, "and the call log." She did. Her hands shook so hard she had to type the address twice. I called the insurance company and asked for the underwriter's supervisor. It took 10 minutes of hold music and 2 transfers. The gala guests were already arriving. I could hear laughter and car doors outside. When the supervisor finally picked up, I kept my voice calm. "This is Gabriel Thorne," I said, "licensed structural engineer on the Holloway Inn project. I am calling about the last-minute $10,000 risk deposit you added." "That is standard when we receive a complaint about structural safety," the man said. "We have to protect ourselves." "You received an anonymous complaint," I said, "and you ignored a sealed engineer's report. That is not standard. That is bad faith." "Sir, I have stamped drawings," I said. "I have photos. I have a signed third-party inspection. Your own field inspector approved this floor." "The only new information you have is a phone call from a man with a grudge." Silence. Then, "What makes you think there was a phone call?" Quote, "I looked at Marcus. He held up his phone. Because I have the voicemail he left on the inn's public line," I said. He used his full name, Julian Holloway. "He called your company and said, and I quote, "The ballroom is unsafe. If you keep them insured and something happens, I'd hate to see your company in court." Quote. Marcus pressed play. The hallway filled with Julian's smug voice. I held the phone up so the supervisor could hear. When it ended, I brought the phone back to my ear. "So here is the situation," I said. "You can keep charging a made-up deposit based on a lie, or you can reinstate the policy under normal terms based on my stamped report. If you choose the first option, I will need your name and your decision in writing so I can send it to the state board with the recording of that call." Another silence. I could hear keys clicking. "You put your own license on this?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I stamped it. If anything happens to that floor, I am ruined." "That is how sure I am." He let out a slow breath. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "we can waive the risk deposit if we add an engineer's rider tied to your professional liability." "Send it," I said. An email popped up on my screen a minute later. I read every line twice. It was simple. They tied the coverage to my stamp. If something failed because of structure, it was on me. I signed with my full name and license number. "Coverage is active," the supervisor said. "No extra deposit. Have a good night." I hung up and turned the screen so Genevieve could see the confirmation. "It is done," I said. She put a hand over her mouth, eyes closing. I saw anger and relief fighting inside her, tangled together. "You planned for this," she said quietly. "I planned for Julian," I said. She looked at the ballroom doors where guests were starting to gather. "Tell me what you need from me," she said. It was not a plea. It was partnership. "Walk in like you own the place," I said, "because you do. If Julian shows up, do not argue with him. Just look at me. If I pull you away, you come with me. No questions." She nodded once. "Yes," she said. The gala started. The ballroom glowed with warm light. The reinforced floor held every step, every spin, every crowded circle of people talking. No bounce, no creak. The band played. Glasses clinked. The air buzzed with money and stories. Genevieve moved through the room like she had been born to it. She smiled. She thanked donors. She did not flinch every time someone mentioned the inn's future like she used to. Every few minutes, her eyes found me across the crowd. Just a quick check. "Am I okay? Are we okay?" I answered with a nod. Halfway through the night, Julian showed up. Of course he did. He walked into the ballroom in a sharp suit, fake charm turned up to full. His eyes locked on Genevieve. He started toward her like he owned the path. I met him halfway. "Enjoy your night somewhere else, Julian," I said, keeping my voice even. "This is my family's property," he said. "I have as much right to be here as she does." "You had your chance to support her," I said. "You chose to bury her instead. So no, tonight you do not get equal rights." He leaned in, voice dropping. "You really think a paper license and a kiss in the street makes this real?" he sneered. "Everyone knows she is using you. Once this place is gone, she will throw you back where she found you." "No," I said, "because this place is not going to be gone. And even if it was, I did not marry the building." His eyebrows shot up. "Enjoy your evening," I said. "And if you make one more false report to an insurer or a bank, my lawyer calls you before sunrise." For the first time, he looked unsure. His gaze flicked past me to the crowd, to the donors, to the trust overseer standing near the dessert table. Then he backed off. Genevieve had watched the whole thing from across the room. She did not rush over. She waited until Julian left the building. Then she walked to me slowly, her dress swishing around her ankles. She took my sleeve in her fingers and rose up on her toes. In the middle of the dancing and the noise, she pressed a clean, sure kiss to my mouth. Not a show, not a stunt. Her choice, her timing. When she pulled back, her fingers stayed curled in my jacket. "Thank you," she said simply. Later, Mr. Henderson, the trust overseer, found us near the dessert table. He was in a dark tux, his stern face softer under the warm lights. "I have reviewed the bank filings," he said quietly, "and your marriage certificate. The trust recognizes this union. The moral turpitude petition is closed." He held out his hand. I shook it. He gave Genevieve a small, respectful nod, then moved on. Julian had nothing left to use against her. The donors were happy. Pledge cards filled the box. Checks slipped into the locked slot, one after another. I could almost see the math shifting in her favor. When the last guest left and the band packed up, the ballroom was quiet again. Only a few candles still flickered on the tables. Genevieve and I stood in the middle of the empty room. "We did it," she said. "You did it," I corrected. She looked up at me. Her lipstick was smudged. Her hair was loose. She had never looked more alive. "Come on," she said. "Home." We drove back to the inn in her car. I had sold my truck a week earlier to cover vendor deposits. I did not tell her that part until the sale was done. In the kitchen, the adrenaline faded and the questions came back. "Why?" she asked again, leaning against the counter. And do not say good architecture this time. I rested my palms on the edge of the counter across from her. "The first time I saw you, I said, you were yelling at a contractor for trying to overcharge you for lumber." Her eyes widened. She remembered. "You were alone," I said. "Everyone told you to sell. Everyone told you it was hopeless. You fought anyway." I thought, that is a woman who builds things. "I wanted to build something with you." She swallowed. "You risked everything," she said. "Your savings, your name, your license, your truck." "I invested everything," I said. "There is a difference." Her eyes dropped to my hands. My fingers were curled into the edge of the counter. My hands were half in my pockets, like always. "You always hide your hands," she whispered. "Why?" "Because if I take them out," I said, my voice rough, "I am going to touch you, and if I touch you, I won't want to stop, and I promised you, this was just business." She let out a shaky breath. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her fingers around my wrists. Slowly, she pulled my hands out of my pockets and placed them on her waist. "The business deal is over," she said. "The gala is done. The bank is calm. So what are we now?" I tightened my hands just enough to feel her, to make sure this was real. "We are whatever you want us to be," I said. She smiled, small and sure. "I think we are married," she said. I kissed her. Not for a camera, not for a trust, not for a show. It was slow and deep and steady, like setting a beam and knowing it would hold. The next morning, I was making coffee when she walked into the kitchen in jeans and a sweater, hair pulled into a messy knot. She held a folder. "We need to go to the lawyer," she said. My heart stuttered. "To file for an annulment?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "No," she said. "To file this." She laid the paper on the table. It was a deed transfer. Genevieve Holloway and Gabriel Thorne, joint tenants with rights of survivorship. 50%. 50%. "I am adding you to the deed," she said. "You own half the inn. Half the debt, half the asset. You are not just the guy whose name is on the loan. You are the guy whose name is on the door." "Jen," I said, "you do not have to." "You saved it," she said. "You sold your truck. You gave up your clean exit. I am not letting you carry this alone." She picked up a pen and signed her name. Then she held the pen out to me. "Partners?" she asked. I took the pen. My hand did not shake. "Partners," I said, signing beside her. She smiled, bright and wide. "Good," she said. "Now put your boots on. The west roof is leaking." Quote, "I know," I said. "I already ordered shingles." She laughed, the sound slipping into the old wood, warming it more than the boiler ever could. We walked to the door together. She grabbed her keys. "I'll drive," she said, "since you are currently a pedestrian." I grinned. "I'll marry you," I joked, echoing the words I had thrown out in her basement weeks ago. She stopped in the doorway and looked back at me with a look that made my chest feel too small.